While I said I'm going to do a bit of pandering myself, is this not already the most incredible event? Is everybody having a great time? Well, I'm gonna put an end to that. Because my technology doesn't work. Oh, there we go. We have a presentation? Yes, I'm presenting myself as an artifact of science. But it may seem counterintuitive that the tools of science would be ideally suited to explore why stories matter. After all, science is about finding facts derived from rigorous examination and careful record keeping. Storytelling is about making things up. Science has several words for this concept, including misconduct, fraud, and lying. Science's top practitioners adhere to their strict standards tirelessly, and its aspirants often spend a decade or more in laboratories and institutions of higher learning. More often than not, storytelling's greats work at their leisure. And if an aspiring storyteller spends many years at universities, it's usually a lifestyle choice. Yes, it is true. There are people who bridge these two worlds to the betterment of all. Pandering, it works. But this presentation is pure science. The following statistics come from a recent study titled The Development and Consumption of Narratives and Their Corresponding Effects on Both an Individual and Societal Basis. Exposure to 3 or more narratives a day in any format reduces the chances an individual would do something astoundingly stupid at any given moment by 1.1%. Poor flick. People who consume narratives with greater frequency punch other people less often. Also applies to cute mammals. And societies that develop, consume, and adapt the most narratives achieve way more awesome things than their narratively deficient peers. So already we see that narratives are useful on a personal, interpersonal, and societal scale. These findings were codified into a unified theory of narrative worth shown here. Of course, we don't have time to go through the whole thing, but it boils down to the value of a given narrative is equal to its potential to advance society. I hear murmurs of recognition for the tunnel of progress. That's great. The beautiful thing is this formula can be applied to any narrative to determine its worth, distilling it into an easily understood number value between 0 and 5, 0 being narrative name only, or NINO, and 5 being maximum progress potential. I can tell you're already convinced. But let's go ahead and walk through the narrative value scale using a handy app I've embedded in this presentation that applies the unified theory formula. As I read an escalating series of narratives handed to me by a writer friend backstage, their numerical values will appear. A person existed, then died. Yeah, that's what I thought. It barely qualifies as narrative, but it does give us a baseline to work from. Let's see what happens when we increase the narrative complexity. A woman died while crossing the street. And narrative. Much better. Although still a simple narrative, from it a person can learn that crossing streets can be hazardous, ergo the higher score. But at this rate, it's going to take an hour to go through all of these scenarios here, so I'm just going to skip to the last and by far the most complex scenario. Okay. Doris Bennett lived for 89 years, the last 30 as a clear-minded widow in her home on a quiet through street in Chicago. Her only friend was her dog Samson, a 5-year-old Rottweiler the neighborhood kids called Devil Dog, mistaking his gruff demeanor for meanness. And Samson was gruff, perhaps because he understood that Doris was alone in the world and needed someone to look out for her. When Doris ventured outside, Samson led the way, with his double-barrel gaze reserving a rumbling growl for rowdier children. "Hush, Samson," Doris would say. "They're just kids out here enjoying themselves, just like you and me." Apart from Doris Bennett, the only living creature that Samson couldn't fool was a toffee-colored stray known as Notch, named for her battle-scarred ear.